Get on your knees if you want to stay here, my son said, not shouting, just bored, like he was asking me to move a chair. The words landed cleanly, the way a glass falls and does not crack until after it touches the floor. I felt them under my skin, a cold that didn't pass. I kept my hands on the back of the dining chair so they wouldn't shake. He looked past me toward the hallway, already done with me, already reaching for his phone. I said nothing. I have learned that silence can be stronger than any apology. He turned away, muttering something about grown adults and bills, about respect. Respect. The word tasted wrong in my mouth. The kitchen light hummed above us. The bulb has been doing that for weeks. I told him about it. He said later. Later is where my life has lived for a long time, folded and stored on a high shelf. He walked into his room and shut the door with the soft arrogance of a man who believes the walls will always hold. I stood there a while, breathing through the place the sentence had cut. I thought about the chair under my hands, sturdy, maple, bought in a year when money mattered, and we counted it. When every cup had a saucer, and every promise had a date. The chair did not wobble. I did not wobble either. I took my hands off it and checked the lock on the front door, out of habit. I set the kettle on, also out of habit. When you are my age, you survive by routine. It keeps you from falling into holes other people dig for you. The kettle boiled. I made tea and drank half a cup standing up. In the window, the night was a flat sheet, no stars. My reflection looked back at me. 78, white hair tucked behind my ears, jaw set the way my late husband used to like it when I had to argue with a pharmacist about dosage. I smiled at her. Not a pretty smile, a working one. Then I washed the cup, dried it, and put it in the rack like a person who intends to use it again. From his room came the sound of a video, then laughter that did not belong to a kind man. I let the sound pass through me. I did not rehearse comebacks. I did not look for reasons. That sentence was enough. There are moments when the road turns and you do not have to explain the turn. You just take it. I took it quietly. I walked to my room and closed the door. The room smelled faintly of lavender from the sachet I tucked under the pillow last month. I sat on the bed, slow and careful with my knees, and felt my heart settle into a new pace. I thought of leaving right then, the simple act of picking up my bag and my keys and stepping into the hallway. No drama, no speeches. I pictured the feel of the cool night on my cheeks, the sound of my steps on the front path. But leaving is also a kind of staying if you go without closing anything behind you. I needed to close. On the dresser lay the small cloth purse I carry inside my bigger bag. I opened it and counted what was there. Enough for a taxi, a motel, a week of groceries if I took the bus. Enough for dignity if used correctly. I turned off the lamp and lay down, shoes and all, because I did not want to give the night the courtesy of comfort. The house settled around me, old wood complaining in the familiar places. I listened for his footsteps. None. Just the video, then the click when it ended, and the thicker quiet of sleep. I do not pray for patience anymore. Patience is how women like me lose years. I prayed for a steady hand. My hand is all I have ever been able to trust. I let my breath lengthen. I waited until the quiet grew heavy. Then I rose, eased the door open, and stepped into the hall. The floorboard near the bathroom always squeaks if you hit it wrong. I did not hit it wrong. The bathroom door was cool beneath my fingers. I stood there, gathering myself the way you stand before lifting a box that might be heavier than it looks. My son snored once, short, like a cough, then turned. I waited. The house waited with me. In the kitchen, the air was stale with the ghost of boiled water. I did not turn on the overhead light. I used the small lamp above the stove. It threw a thin yellow over everything: the sink, the dish rack, the bowl with 2 apples, the hook where I keep my keys. Every object had its place. I let that fact strengthen me. His jacket hung on the back of a chair, careless. The pocket bulged. He had asked for temporary help with rent, and I had given it by noon, because that is what I do. He had not put the money in a bank. He had not even hidden it. He had let it sit there like tribute. I felt something cold and clean move through me. I reached into the pocket and took out the thick envelope. I did not hurry. I felt each edge against my skin. Paper is nothing until it becomes a promise. Then it becomes a leash. I opened it and looked, not counting, not naming, just seeing. Then I closed it and held it flat on my palm. The bathroom was 10 steps away. I walked them. I lifted the lid. I did not think of laws or consequences or the way he would shout in the morning. I thought about my knees, the clean tile, the steady hand I had asked for. I tore the first bill down the center, then the next, then the next. A soft, regular sound, like someone quietly leaving a room. When the envelope was empty, I sat on the edge of the tub and waited until my breath was quiet again. Then I stood, smoothed my skirt, and washed my hands. The mirror gave me back a woman who had done a small, hard thing without flinching. I nodded to her, turned off the light, and went to bed. I slept lightly, the way you do after a decision that rearranges the furniture inside your chest. Morning found the house gray and honest. The old heater coughed itself awake. The pipes answered. I swung my legs over the side of the bed and felt for my slippers with my toes. Knees first, then back, then breath. This is how I stand now. Nothing in me hurried. I was not hiding. In the kitchen, I opened the blinds and let the day see what we had done. The sky was the color of paper before ink. I measured oats, a pinch of salt, a handful of raisins that had gone stubborn in their jar. While the kettle worked, I wiped a ring from the table where last night's cup had stood. Small obediences restore order. I set 2 bowls out of habit and then, just as calmly, put one back. A door opened down the hall. His steps were heavy, careless, the walk of a man who believes the floor is his. He came in scratching his jaw, hair pushed up in clumps, the phone in his hand like a second spine. "Coffee," he said, not as a question. I poured him some. I didn't smile and I didn't frown. We are not dogs to be trained by either. He sniffed at the air. "Did you move my jacket?" "No." He grunted, drank, then left the mug half full and went to the chair where he'd flung the jacket last night. He patted the pockets, at first lazy, then faster. A small performance began. The muttered word, the frown, the second check, the third. He shook the jacket as if money might rattle out like a screw. When nothing fell, he went to his room and came back with a drawer in his hands, then put it down and pulled another. The kitchen became a search party without purpose. "Ma," he said, staring at me as if I were a window he could see through. "Where is it?" "Where is what?" "Don't," he said, a warning that used to work. "The rent, the envelope, I put it right here." I stirred the oats and turned down the flame. If it was so important, the bank would have been safer. He blinked at that, like someone walking into light. Then the heat rose in him. "Cut the lectures. Did you take it?" "I'm serious." I'm serious too, I said. Eat your breakfast before it clumps. He stepped closer. His breath had the sour of sleep. You think this is funny? Do you know what happens if I don't pay? They slap a fee. Then another. You want me thrown out? Is that what you want? I want you to behave like a man who keeps his word, I said. That would be new. The words surprised even me with how calmly they stood between us. He stared, measuring them, then tipped a hand through his hair. You gave me that money yesterday. Where is it? In yesterday, I said. He swore, a short, ugly word he learned from men who never met their own eyes. He pulled out his phone and paced the small kitchen, tapping and tapping as if he could generate cash by speed. I'll call the landlord, he said to the air. I'll tell him there was a what? He didn't answer. He was already composing a story. He is good at stories when they carry him over a ditch. He set the phone down, picked it up again, set it down. His hand shook now, and not from kindness. Ma, I need that money. You needed respect more, I said. You spent it. He laughed, but the laugh had no home. You're being cruel. He looked around, eyes snagging on places I had dusted for years. You live here too, remember? If I'm late, we both suffer. No, I said. I've suffered already. He stared at the sink, then at the floor, then at me. I watched a calculation build, not a thought about right or wrong, but about leverage. You don't want trouble, he said. People talk. It won't look good if your son... I am 78, I said. Good has already been decided where it matters. The kettle began to rattle again, all on its own. I turned it off. The oats were ready, soft and decent. I ladled a portion into my bowl and carried it to the table. The chair did not complain when I sat. He stood over me, waiting for me to change into the mother he prefers, the one who apologizes for air and pays for everything else. When change didn't come, he tried a softer key. Mom, he said, the shape of the word careful, almost tender. I said something stupid last night. I was mad. I shouldn't have. You know how stress gets me. I do, I said. It walks you like a dog. I'll fix it, he promised, and in the promise, I could hear the empty room it would echo in. Just help me now, please. I pushed the second bowl toward him. Start by sitting, I said. A man who can sit and eat without threatening his mother might deserve help next week, or next year, or never. Try. He looked at the bowl as if it were bait. Pride and fear wrestled in his face. Pride lost. He sat. The spoon clicked once, then again. For a minute we were almost ordinary. Two people tasting something warm, the clock on the wall counting us forward whether we wanted it or not. I'll go to the bank after breakfast, I said, and his head came up fast. Hope too bright. To withdraw? To put things in order, I said. The kind of order that keeps people from confusing my name with their account. He set the spoon down. You're serious? Yes. He thumped his knee with his fist and stood again, the chair scraping the tile. Fine. Do whatever. I'll fix it my way. He grabbed his jacket and keys, patted the empty pocket one last time as if it might forgive him, and left, the door hard behind him, because doors rarely get an apology. The house exhaled. I finished my oats in peace. I washed my bowl, dried it, and placed it upside down so no dust would settle. Then I wiped the table again, for nothing but the pleasure of seeing wood shine. I put on my shoes, the good ones with a steady heel, and my coat with the missing button I keep meaning to replace. I found my bag. I checked for my ID. I added the little notebook where I write what I will not forget. Before I left, I walked to his door. It stood half open, bed unmade, a sock dead on the floor. I did not go in. I am done entering places where I am not invited. At the mirror in the hallway, I saw the same woman I had seen in the night. Not grand, not brave, but awake. I touched the side of the mirror once with 2 fingers, an old habit. Steady, I told the glass. Then I locked the front door behind me and stepped into the day. The next morning, the air was heavy with rain, the kind that doesn't fall yet, but presses down on you as if testing how much weight you can bear. I made my tea and sat at the kitchen table, the quiet almost too clean, like a pause before music starts. My son had not come home the night before. That didn't surprise me, but the way I felt, calm, not waiting, not dreading, did. I had errands to run, or so I told myself. Really, I just wanted to see the world outside of his shadow. I put on my coat, buttoned it all the way, and stepped out. The wind smelled of wet leaves. At the market, I bought nothing more than a loaf of bread, some eggs, and a single apple. Small purchases, but they felt like a declaration. I am not stocking his shelves today. On the way back, I stopped by the post office. In my mailbox was a single envelope from the bank. I stood on the steps to read it, the drizzle beginning to mist my hair. It was a reminder about my safety deposit box. I had almost forgotten it existed, small, tucked away in the corner of a vault, holding the documents my son has hinted about for years. The deed, the insurance papers, my will. I walked straight to the bank. The clerk greeted me with the politeness reserved for the very old and very deliberate. I signed my name slowly, so each letter could stand on its own, and followed him to the little room where the box was brought to me. The papers were all there, as neat as the day I'd placed them inside. I read each one, not because I didn't know what they said, but because I wanted to feel the weight of them. My name was on every page, not his, not anyone else's. When I left, I didn't take the papers with me. I simply locked them up again, but in my mind, the key felt heavier in my pocket. Back home, I boiled eggs and ate one standing at the counter. It was past noon when I heard his key in the lock. He came in smelling faintly of beer and cheap cologne. "Morning," he said, though it was not morning. I nodded, but didn't ask where he'd been. That, I have learned, is an invitation to be lied to. He noticed the bread and eggs. "No coffee? We're out." "We aren't out," I said. "I just didn't buy any." His eyebrows drew together. "Why not?" "Because I don't drink it." For a moment, the room went still. I could see the thought forming behind his eyes, that I was changing the rules, the quiet ones that had let him live comfortably without earning it. "You're in a mood," he said, reaching into the fridge. "No," I said. "I'm in my home." He turned to face me, a slice of bread in one hand. "You know, if you're upset about last night, you could have just said so, instead of acting—" "Acting how?" I asked. "Like you're different." "I am different," I said, and the words surprised me by how true they felt. He laughed once, the kind of laugh that covers irritation. "Fine. Be different. Just don't make it my problem." He took his sandwich into his room and shut the door. I stood there, listening to the click of the latch, and realized something. He thought this was a phase, that I'd sulk, then return to the same mother who stocked his fridge, paid his bills, and let his words land like blows without leaving a mark. But I am not a phase. I am a decision. By late afternoon, the rain had started in earnest, pattering against the windows like small, insistent fingers. I sat in my armchair with a notebook, the one I keep for lists and thoughts I don't want to lose. On a fresh page, I wrote down 3 things. Visit the bank again, make changes to the will, speak to Mrs. Howard about the spare room she rents, find out how much a bus ticket to Portland costs. I didn't need to do them all at once. I didn't even need to tell him. The point was that I could. When the clock chimed 6, I turned on the lamp beside me. The light fell on my hands. Older now, veined, the skin thinner than it once was, but still steady, still mine. I poured myself tea, the good kind I keep at the back of the cupboard, and sat down to drink it in peace. Outside, the rain blurred the streetlights into soft halos. Inside, I felt something settle into place. It was not joy, not yet, but it was the first shape of freedom. I woke before dawn, not to the sound of him moving around, but to silence. Thick, comfortable silence. For a moment, I thought he might have left in the night. The idea did not frighten me. It let me breathe deeper. I made tea and stood by the window, watching the dark dissolve into the pale blue of early morning. The street was slick from yesterday's rain. The neighbor's cat padded across it like the owner of the world. My son's car was still in the driveway, angled carelessly, as always. So he was here, just sleeping like a man with no alarms and no urgency. I had my own errands today. I dressed simply but neatly. Wool skirt, clean cardigan, the brown coat I've kept for 20 years because it makes me look like someone who minds her business. In my bag, I put the folder with my personal documents, the little notebook, and a pen. The first stop was the bank. The same clerk from yesterday recognized me, his smile polite, but curious. "Back so soon, Mrs. Lawson?" "Yes," I said. "I'd like to make some changes." I sat across from him in a small, glass-walled office. The fluorescent light was unflattering, but I didn't care. I explained what I wanted: a new beneficiary on the account, removal of my son's name from anything it had ever been attached to, and a private security question only I could answer. He nodded, typing quickly, asking for my ID more times than necessary. I gave it each time without fuss. This was my work now, building a wall between my life and his reach. When we finished, I signed the last form slowly, pressing the pen just enough to feel it bite into the paper. "All set," the clerk said. "Yes," I replied. "I believe I am." From there, I walked 2 blocks to the bakery. Not for bread, though the smell nearly pulled me in, but to see the notice board by the door. It was cluttered with the usual: piano lessons, lawn care, missing pets. But near the bottom, half covered by a flyer for yoga, was a card. Room for rent. Furnished, private entrance. Call Mrs. Howard. I slipped it into my pocket before anyone else could notice. I didn't call her right away. Instead, I walked home slowly, letting the idea settle. The clouds were thinning, sunlight breaking through in uneven patches, lighting the wet pavement in silver. When I came in, he was in the kitchen, hair messy, still in the clothes from yesterday. He was making coffee, his coffee, like it was a normal day. "Where have you been?" he asked, not looking up. "Out," I said. "Out where?" "Just out." I hung up my coat. He studied me over the rim of his mug. "You're acting strange." "I'm acting," I said. "Exactly how I want to." That seemed to puzzle him more than any direct answer could have. He didn't ask again. I went to my room, closed the door, and sat at the desk by the window. From there, I could see the maple tree in the front yard, its leaves starting to turn. I took out my notebook and wrote down Mrs. Howard's number. In the afternoon, I called her. Her voice was warm, brisk. "Yes, it's still available," she said. "Small, but clean. No smoking, no loud music." "I don't smoke," I said, "and the only music I keep is in my head." She laughed. "Come by tomorrow if you'd like to see it." I agreed. When I hung up, I didn't feel guilty. That surprised me. I had thought I might, leaving him without a word, planning a life he wouldn't be part of. But all I felt was steady, like I'd put my feet on a path that had been waiting for me all along. That night, he ordered takeout. I made myself an omelet instead. We ate separately, the way we've been living for years without admitting it. I washed my plate, dried it, and put it away. Tomorrow, I would see the room. I didn't know if I would take it yet, but I liked knowing that I could. I didn't sleep much that night, but it wasn't the restless kind of not sleeping I've known before. No replaying of arguments, no rehearsing what I should have said. Just a quiet wakefulness, my mind walking over the thought of that small, separate room at Mrs. Howard's. At 6, I rose, made tea, and dressed without waking him. The morning had that damp chill that makes the bones slow, but I moved steadily. Wool scarf, gloves, my coat buttoned to the neck. I put my notebook in my bag, along with the cash I keep in a folded handkerchief, my just-in-case money. Mrs. Howard lived only 3 streets away, in a narrow brick house with a porch that sagged on one side. She answered the door in a cardigan with mismatched buttons and a pair of sturdy shoes that looked older than my son. Her eyes were sharp, but not unkind. "Come in, dear. Watch the rug. It curls at the corner." The room she showed me was at the back of the house, with its own entrance through a small garden. It smelled faintly of lavender and dust, as though it had been waiting politely for someone to open the window. The bed was made, the quilt worn but clean. A single chair sat by the window, angled toward the light. There was a small desk, an empty wardrobe, and nothing else. "It's not much," she said, "but it's quiet. The rent's fair. No trouble from me as long as you don't bring any." I ran my hand over the desk's edge. The wood was smooth from years of use, not like the cheap hollow furniture my son buys and leaves to warp. "It's more than I need," I said, and meant it. "You can think on it," she said. "No rush." But I didn't need to think. I asked her to hold it for me. We shook hands, her grip strong, certain, and I left with a key on a little brass ring in my pocket. Just holding it made my steps lighter on the walk home. He was in the kitchen when I returned, phone pressed to his ear. I heard him say, "Yeah, I'll have it by Friday, don't worry." Then he looked up, covering the mouthpiece. "Where have you been?" "Out," I said, unbuttoning my coat. He frowned. "Out again? You're acting weird." "I told you before," I said. "I'm acting exactly how I want to." He rolled his eyes and went back to his call. "I said Friday." "Yeah. I'll figure it out." In my room, I sat at my desk and wrote the date in my notebook. Under it, I wrote, "Key in pocket. Door waiting." The rest of the day, I kept to myself. I mended a button on my coat, made soup, read a few pages of an old novel. I heard him pacing in his room, the way he does when he's cornered and trying to think of an escape. But for once, I didn't feel the urge to ease his mind or offer solutions. That night, as I folded my scarf and set it on the chair, my fingers brushed the brass key. Smooth, warm from my pocket. I put it under my pillow before I turned out the light. It felt right to sleep with the weight of my own choice so close. Ruth caught me on the sidewalk the next morning, her coat unbuttoned, hair tucked under a knitted hat she'd probably made herself. She's lived 2 doors down for as long as I've been here, though we've never been more than polite neighbors. Hello at the mailbox, a wave from the porch. But lately, she's been watching me differently, the way women sometimes do when they've already guessed what you're not saying. "You're out early," she said. "So are you." She smiled. "Needed milk. And I wanted to see if you'd stop pretending nothing's wrong." I didn't answer right away. The street smelled of wet leaves and chimney smoke. A dog barked 2 houses over. My son's car sat where it had been all week, like a rusted punctuation mark. "Things are changing," I said finally. "That's all?" Ruth nodded slowly, as though this was exactly what she'd expected. "Good. Change before you can't." She shifted her bag to the other arm. I watched my sister wait too long. Her son bled her dry. Not just money. Years. She kept thinking he'd turn back into the boy she raised. He didn't. People rarely walk backward unless they have to. We stood there a moment, wind lifting the edge of my scarf. I thought of the key in my pocket, how it felt heavier than gold. "Your sister?" I asked. "She moved out, rented a room from a friend, never went back. Best thing she ever did." I didn't tell Ruth about Mrs. Howard's room, but I didn't need to. She seemed to see something in my face, because she patted my arm and said, "When you go, go all the way. Don't leave a trail they can follow." Back inside, the house felt colder. He was still asleep, door shut. I made tea, then sat at the table with my notebook and wrote Ruth's words exactly as she'd said them. I underlined, "Don't leave a trail." By mid-morning, I was at the bank again. The teller knew me now. He didn't even try to hide his curiosity. This time, I withdrew most of my savings in cash, neatly banded, small enough to hide in my coat lining. I left enough in the account to keep it open, but not enough for him to sniff out. When I returned, his bedroom door was open. He was at the table, looking through a stack of papers, some bills, some envelopes I recognized as mine. "Why are you going through my things?" I asked. "They were in the hall," he said too quickly. "I thought they were for me." They weren't. I took the stack from him and set it on the counter. My hand didn't shake, but I could feel his eyes looking for a tremor. "You've been at the bank a lot," he said, leaning back in his chair. "What's going on?" "I'm taking care of myself," I said. The same words I'd used on the phone days ago. He gave a short laugh. "You mean you're hiding money from me?" "I'm keeping my money with me," I corrected. "There's a difference." He pushed back his chair. "That's cold, Ma." "No colder than being told to get on my knees," I said. His face shifted at that. Anger, maybe shame, maybe just annoyance that I'd remembered. He stood, grabbed his keys, and said, "Fine. Do whatever. You'll be sorry when you need me." The door slammed. The house exhaled again, the way it always does when he leaves. I went to my room and unstitched a seam inside my coat lining, slipping the cash into the space before sewing it shut. It lay flat, invisible, a pocket no one else knew about. In the afternoon, Ruth called. "If you need a ride to wherever you're going, say the word," she said. I thanked her, but didn't promise anything. I have learned to keep my movements my own. That night, I reheated the soup from yesterday and ate it at the kitchen table alone. His chair stayed empty. I didn't wonder where he was. I didn't check the clock. Before bed, I put the coat with the hidden money on the back of my chair, ready. The key to Mrs. Howard's room was in the coat pocket, cool against the fabric. I touched it once before turning out the light. I could feel something gathering in me, not nerves, not fear, but a kind of stillness. The stillness you get before you lift a heavy weight, knowing you can carry it. The next morning, I woke with a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in years. Not the kind of purpose that comes from serving someone else's needs, but the quiet, solid kind that belongs entirely to you. The sky was pale and thin, the sun still deciding if it wanted to bother with the day. I dressed in my wool skirt and sturdy shoes, the ones with soles thick enough for walking long blocks. My coat was heavier now, with what I'd sewn into it, but the weight felt right, like a promise kept. I slipped the key to Mrs. Howard's room into the small pocket where my hand could find it without looking. He was in the kitchen when I came out, hair uncombed, making coffee. "You're going out again?" he asked, voice flat but watchful. "Yes." I tied my scarf slowly. "I have things to do." He leaned against the counter. "Things that don't involve helping me, I guess." I looked at him the way you look at someone across a bus aisle. Close enough to see, too far to touch. "Correct." He smirked like he thought he'd won something. "Go ahead. Just remember who's been letting you stay here." The words barely touched me. I'd been preparing for this conversation since the moment he said, "Get on your knees." "You mean the house I've paid most of the bills for over the last 2 years?" I said quietly. He didn't answer. Just drank his coffee and stared into the mug as though the bottom might give him better lines. I walked out without another word. At the bank, I met with a different clerk. Older, with silver hair and glasses low on his nose. He reviewed my papers without comment, then helped me open a new account in my name only at a branch across town. I deposited part of the cash from my coat lining. The rest stayed where it was, stitched into the seam. From there, I went to the post office and bought a small lockbox. It fit in my bag with room to spare, too. By the time I returned home, he was gone. The silence felt almost gentle. I made myself tea and sat at the kitchen table with my notebook, writing down the address of the new bank and the combination to the lockbox. Then I tore the page out, folded it, and slipped it into an envelope I would place in my safety deposit box the next time I went. Around 4 o'clock, Ruth stopped by with a paper bag. "Banana bread," she said. I made too much. We sat at the table, the bread still warm between us. She asked no questions and I gave no answers, but her eyes kept landing on the coat draped over my chair. She's the kind of woman who notices the way a seam lies. "Cold out," she said eventually. "Yes," I replied. "Getting colder." After she left, I packed a small bag. 2 changes of clothes, my toiletries, the notebook, and a photograph of my husband from the year we met. I set it in my closet, behind the extra blanket. He came home late, stomping snow from his boots, his mood sharp and restless. "We need to talk," he said. "I'm tired," I replied, moving past him toward my room. He followed. "You've been pulling away, acting secretive." "What's going on?" I turned to face him in the hallway. "What's going on is that I'm done living like this." He laughed without humor. "You think you can just walk away?" "I know I can," I said. His jaw tightened. "Fine. But don't come crawling back when it doesn't work out." "I won't," I said, and closed my door. Later, as I lay in bed, the key in my pocket pressed lightly against my leg. I thought about Mrs. Howard's quiet room, about waking up without waiting to hear someone else's mood before deciding my own. The choice was no longer a maybe. It was a date forming in my mind, as clear and solid as the brass ring of the key. The snow had melted overnight, leaving the streets slick and dark. I woke before the sun, not because of noise, he was still sleeping, but because my mind had already started moving. Today, I would begin tying off the loose ends, the threads he could pull on if he noticed I was gone. I moved quietly, making tea without the kettle whistle, buttering a piece of bread so thin you could almost see through it. The key to Mrs. Howard's room lay on the table in front of me. I turned it over in my hand, the small weight grounding me. When I heard the creak of his bed frame, I slipped the key into my pocket and put on my coat. I didn't want a conversation before I'd done what needed doing. At the bus stop, the air smelled faintly of diesel and wet asphalt. I rode 3 stops to the branch of the bank where I'd opened the new account, then asked to rent a safety deposit box. The clerk led me down a hallway lined with numbered doors, each one the same, each hiding someone's private world. Inside, I placed the lockbox I'd bought, along with my notebook and the envelope containing the address and combination. My hands felt steady, my breathing slow. From the bank, I went to the small law office above the bakery. The lawyer, a man with a quiet voice and a desk stacked with tidy piles of paper, reviewed my will with me. We removed his name from the emergency contact section, from the in the event of paragraphs, from everything. I kept my instructions simple. If I were to fall ill or pass, Ruth would be the one to decide, not him. When I signed the updated document, the lawyer glanced up. "Do you want him to be notified at all?" I shook my head. "If he wants to know about me, he can ask. I don't owe him the news." It was almost noon when I returned home. He was at the kitchen table scrolling on his phone. "Where have you been?" "Out." "Out where?" I hung up my coat. "Out." He gave a short, mocking laugh. "You think you're being mysterious, but you're just being old and stubborn." I filled the kettle. "And you're being exactly who you've been for years. The difference is, I've stopped pretending I don't notice." His head came up at that. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means," I said, "I've stopped paying for my own disrespect." The kettle began to hum. He stared at me for a long moment, then shook his head. "You're losing it, Ma." He pushed back his chair and left the room. I made my tea and drank it slowly, listening to the sound of his footsteps in the hall, the door to his room closing. The house was quiet again. That afternoon, Ruth called. "You ready yet?" she asked. "Not today," I said. "But soon." "Good. Let me know the night before and I'll have the car warm for you." I thanked her, then went to my room and pulled my small bag from the closet. I added the cash from my coat lining, dividing it between 2 envelopes, one for my handbag, one to hide in the lining of the bag itself. I'd learned long ago not to keep all my safety in one place. As I zipped the bag shut, I heard him moving in the hallway. He knocked once on my door, not waiting for me to answer before stepping in. "We need to talk," he said. I didn't put the bag away. I let him see it on the bed. "What's that?" he asked. "Mine." He smirked. "Going somewhere?" "Eventually." His eyes narrowed. "You can't just leave. This is your home." "It's a building," I said. "A home is where you're treated like you belong?" For a moment, something flickered across his face. Anger, maybe fear, but it passed quickly. "You're being dramatic." "No," I said. "I'm being done." He laughed again, but it was thin this time. "Fine. Leave. See how long you last." "I plan to," I said. When he left the room, I could hear the front door open and close. I sat on the edge of the bed, my bag beside me. and felt the house settle into its quiet. I didn't need to run tonight, but I could. That was the difference. And knowing that I could, was the first time in years I felt entirely safe. Lily called that evening, just as I was washing my teacup. Her voice was tentative, the way you speak to someone you're not sure still wants to hear from you. "Hi, Grandma. Is this a good time?" I hadn't heard from her in months, not since her father told me she was too busy to visit. I dried my hands on a towel and sat at the table. "It's always a good time for you." She hesitated. "I don't want to cause trouble, but I think Dad's been lying to you about me." I smiled, though she couldn't see it. "I think Dad's been lying to me about a lot of things." She laughed softly, then grew serious. "He told me you were having memory problems, that you weren't up for visitors." The teacup in my hand felt suddenly heavier. "Is that so?" "Yes. And when I said I wanted to see you, he told me you'd moved into a care facility." She paused. I knew that wasn't true, but he can be convincing. I'm sorry I didn't push harder. I closed my eyes for a moment, feeling the years of small, calculated distances he'd placed between me and the people who cared about me. "It's not your fault, Lily. But I'm glad you called." She told me about her job at the library, about the small apartment she was renting with a friend, about how she'd been saving for her own car. I listened, picturing her the way I last saw her, hair pulled back, a face both young and sharp, eyes that missed nothing. Finally, she said, "Grandma, are you okay?" "I'm better than I've been in a long time," I told her, and I meant it. There was a pause, then, "Is he treating you okay?" I thought about lying, but Lily was old enough to know the truth, and I was too tired for lies. "No, he isn't." She took a breath, the kind you take before saying something you've been holding in. "He's been using you. I've heard the way he talks about you, like you owe him everything, like you're lucky he lets you live there." I let the words land without flinching. "I know." "You deserve better," she said fiercely. "I do," I agreed. "And I'm making sure I get it." Her voice softened. "Do you need help?" I thought about the key in my pocket, the bag in my closet, Ruth's car waiting whenever I was ready. "I have help," I said, "but knowing you're in my corner makes it stronger." We talked for another hour, about small things mostly, recipes, books, the weather. When we hung up, I felt lighter. He hadn't taken her away from me entirely. Later, he came home, stomping his boots in the hallway. "Who were you talking to?" "Lily," I said. His face tightened. "What did you tell her?" "The truth." He dropped his keys on the counter. "You love turning people against me, don't you?" I dried my teacup and set it in the rack. "If they turn against you, maybe you should ask yourself why." His mouth opened, then shut. For once, he didn't have a comeback. He went to his room, the door closing harder than it needed to. In the quiet that followed, I sat at the table with my notebook. On a fresh page, I wrote, "Lily knows." She believes me. Then beneath that, she's part of my circle now. It wasn't a big circle, just Ruth, Lily, and me. But it was enough. Before bed, I moved my packed bag from the closet to the space under my bed where I could reach it quickly. The key stayed in my coat pocket. I fell asleep imagining the sound of Ruth's car pulling up to the curb, the soft click of my new door closing behind me, the kind of quiet that belongs to no one but me. It wasn't a fantasy anymore. It was a plan, and plans, once made, are very hard to stop. The next morning, I woke to sunlight on the wall. Thin winter light, but still enough to make me squint. I stayed in bed a few minutes, listening. No footsteps, no cupboard doors, no coffee grinder. The house felt empty, and for once, that was a gift. I made tea and sat by the window, the steam fogging the glass. Across the street, Mrs. Henderson was clearing snow from her steps, her breath rising in soft clouds. Watching her, I thought about all the ordinary mornings I'd missed in my own life. Mornings swallowed up by someone else's moods, someone else's demands. On the shelf above my desk, I kept a wooden box of letters from my husband. I'd stopped opening it years ago, afraid the words inside would feel too far away from the woman I'd become. But that morning, I took it down, dusted the lid, and set it on the table. The letters smelled faintly of cedar. His handwriting, firm, slightly slanted, pulled me back to the days when I still believed my life was mine to shape. One in particular caught my eye. Dated March 14th, 1976, just after our first anniversary. Don't let anyone make you small, not even family. I read that line over and over, my fingers pressing into the paper as if I could press it into myself. He'd known me then, my stubborn streak, my quiet ways, the way I could shrink myself to keep the peace. He'd known, and he'd warned me. I slipped the letter into my notebook, between the pages where I'd been planning my departure. It belonged there. By noon, I'd done 2 loads of laundry, folded everything neatly, and packed a few more items into my bag. Extra socks, my winter gloves, the photograph of us taken on our honeymoon. Each thing I added felt like cutting another thread that tied me here. Around 3, I heard his car in the driveway. I didn't move from my chair. He came in carrying a grocery bag and set it on the counter. "Got dinner," he said, almost cheerful. I nodded. "That's nice." He unpacked a package of chicken, some potatoes, a loaf of bread. "Thought I'd cook tonight," he added, like it was a favor. "You do that," I said. For a while, we moved around the kitchen like polite strangers. Then he glanced at the notebook on the table. "Still making your lists?" "Yes." "What for?" "Things I need to do." He smirked. "Like what? Run away?" I met his eyes. "Something like that." He laughed, shaking his head, as if I'd made a harmless joke. "You wouldn't last a week without me." "I think I'd last forever," I said quietly. He didn't have a response to that. He went back to peeling potatoes, the sound of the peeler against the skin filling the space between us. After dinner, I washed my plate and went to my room. I sat on the bed with my coat beside me, running my fingers along the seam where the money was hidden. The key to Mrs. Howard's room was still in the pocket, warm from the heat of the house. Before sleeping, I wrote one more line in my notebook, beneath my husband's words. "I'm not small anymore." I turned out the light, and for the first time in years, I dreamed not of the past, but of the place I was going. The door closing behind me, the quiet that wasn't empty, but full of myself. And when I woke, the decision was no longer a thought. It was tomorrow. The day before you leave is a strange kind of day. Everything you do feels doubled. Part of you going through the motions. Part of you saying goodbye without saying it aloud. I woke early, before he stirred. The winter air had crept into the house overnight, curling around my ankles as I made tea. I wrapped my hands around the mug and stood at the window. The maple tree in the yard was bare now, its branches black against a pale sky. I'd watched that tree through every season for years, but this morning, I looked at it as if it belonged to someone else. After breakfast, I began moving small things into my bag, things I could take without leaving an obvious gap. My reading glasses, the small sewing kit, the blue scarf Lily knitted for me last Christmas. I slipped the letter from my husband into the side pocket. His words would come with me. By mid-morning, Ruth stopped by. She stepped inside without taking off her coat. "Tomorrow?" she asked in a low voice. "Tomorrow," I confirmed. She nodded. "I'll be out front at 7, early enough that he won't be awake." We stood there a moment, the understanding between us heavy but steady. "You don't have to thank me," she said before leaving. "Just don't look back." After she left, I made soup, not because I was hungry, but because the act of chopping onions, slicing carrots, and stirring the pot gave my hands something to do. The smell filled the house, warm and gentle. He came in just as I was ladling a bowl for myself. "Smells good," he said, in that voice people use when they want something but don't want to ask outright. "There's plenty," I replied. He sat across from me, eating quickly. "You've been quiet," he said finally. "I've had a lot to think about." "Like what?" "Like what I want the rest of my life to look like." He laughed as if I'd made a joke. "You're not exactly 25 anymore." "No," I said, "which means I don't have time to waste." The words seemed to unsettle him. He finished his soup in silence and went to his room. That afternoon, I cleaned the kitchen more thoroughly than usual, scrubbing the sink until it shone, wiping down the shelves, even polishing the kettle. It wasn't for him. It was for me. I wanted to leave the space the way I would have liked to find it, orderly, cared for, without resentment clinging to the corners. As evening came, I took my coat from the chair and checked the seam where the money was hidden. Still there. I slipped the key to Mrs. Howard's room into the pocket, along with a small envelope containing Lily's phone number and address. I'd call her once I was settled. Dinner was quiet. He spent most of it scrolling on his phone, occasionally muttering at something he read. I didn't try to make conversation. My mind was already halfway out the door. Before bed, I sat on the edge of the mattress and looked around my room. The quilt folded at the foot of the bed, the books stacked neatly on the nightstand, the lamp with its slight tilt. These things had been my small comforts, but they were not my freedom. I placed my packed bag within arm's reach and set my shoes by the door. The night felt longer than most, but I didn't mind. I lay awake, listening to the rhythm of the house, the creaks, the hum of the refrigerator, the faint sound of his snoring down the hall. Tomorrow, those sounds would belong to someone else, and mine would be the sound of a new door closing behind me. I didn't feel fear. I didn't even feel relief yet. What I felt was readiness, and that was enough to carry me into sleep. I woke before the alarm I hadn't set, my eyes opening into a darkness that felt almost kind. The clock read 5:12. The house was still. No footsteps, no doors, no hum from the coffee maker. I dressed quietly, layering for the cold. The wool skirt, thick tights, my cardigan under the heavy coat with its hidden seam. The bag went over my shoulder without a sound. I checked the pocket for the key to Mrs. Howard's room and the envelope with Lily's address. Both were there. In the kitchen, I filled the kettle but didn't turn it on. I didn't want the whistle breaking the silence. Instead, I drank a glass of water, standing by the window. Outside, the streetlights cast pale circles on the wet pavement. In one of them, Ruth's car would be waiting soon. At 6:55, I heard the soft purr of her engine before I saw the headlights. She pulled up right in front, just as she promised. I slipped on my gloves and took one last look around the kitchen. The table wiped clean, the dish rack empty. My teacup turned upside down to keep dust out. In the hallway, I passed his door, closed, no sound from inside. I paused only long enough to steady my breath. There was no note, no explanation. Words would only invite answers I didn't want to hear. I locked the front door behind me and stepped into the cold. Ruth leaned over to open the passenger door. "Right on time," she said softly. The drive was quiet. The city was just beginning to stir. Delivery trucks on their routes, a few early walkers hunched against the wind. My bag sat between my feet, my hands folded on top of it. When we reached Mrs. Howard's, the porch light was on, casting a yellow glow on the steps. She was waiting in the doorway, wrapped in a robe. "Come in, dear," she said, her voice warm despite the early hour. The room was just as I'd seen it. Bed made, quilt smoothed, chair by the window. I set my bag down and removed my coat, hanging it on the back of the chair. The air smelled faintly of lavender, as if it had been waiting for me to arrive. Ruth lingered at the door. "You have my number," she said. "If you need anything at all, you call." I nodded. "I will." When she left, I stood in the middle of the small room, letting the quiet wrap around me. It was different from the quiet at his house. That quiet had been heavy, like a lid pressed down. This quiet was open, like a door left ajar. I unpacked slowly, clothes into the wardrobe, the photograph of my husband on the desk, beside the folded letter he'd written me, my sewing kit in the drawer, the envelope with Lily's address in the nightstand, the key to the front door on the desk gleaming in the pale light. When I sat in the chair by the window, the sun was just coming up, turning the wet street outside into a ribbon of gold. I wrapped the quilt around my shoulders and breathed in the scent of lavender. For the first time in years, I didn't feel the need to listen for footsteps in the hall or brace myself for words meant to shrink me. I didn't have to make myself small to keep the peace. This room wasn't much, but it was mine. And from here, I could make the rest of my life whatever I wanted it to be. Mrs. Howard left for her errands mid-morning, handing me a spare key for the back gate. "No rush to pay the rent," she said. "Settle in first." I thanked her, though I already had the envelope ready in my bag. I wanted my place here to be clean, no debts, no favors owed. After she left, I made myself tea in her small kitchen. The kettle was dented, the cups mismatched, but the space was tidy, cared for. Even the way she'd stacked the spoons in their drawer told me this was a house where things were put back in their place. I carried my tea to the little garden behind the house. A stone path wound between dormant rose bushes, their branches trimmed and waiting for spring. I sat on the bench, quilt draped over my lap, and let the cold air sting my cheeks. For years, I'd measured time by someone else's schedule. Now the day stretched in front of me, mine to shape. Around noon, I called Lily. She answered on the second ring. "Grandma?" "Yes, sweetheart. I'm somewhere safe." Her voice cracked just a little. "Did you leave?" "I did. This morning." She was quiet for a beat, then let out a breath that sounded like relief. "Good. Do you need me to come over?" "Not today, but I'll send you the address and you can visit when you like." "I will," she said quickly. "And I'm proud of you." It had been years since anyone said those words to me. I didn't rush to reply. I let them sit there, warm as the tea in my hands. "Thank you, Lily. That means more than you know." After we hung up, I wrote the conversation in my notebook. I wanted to remember the exact way her voice had sounded. Steady, certain, like she believed I could do anything. Later, I walked to the market at the corner. I bought a loaf of bread, some cheese, and a small jar of jam. At the register, I realized I was smiling at the cashier without thinking about it. She smiled back, just a stranger's politeness, but it felt like a beginning. Back at the house, I made a simple lunch and ate it at the desk by the window. Across the street, a boy in a red scarf was teaching a younger child to ride a bike, running alongside with one hand on the seat. I watched them until the younger one wobbled away on their own, the red scarf bobbing as the boy clapped and shouted encouragement. It struck me then. I had left without telling him, and he didn't know where I was. The thought didn't frighten me. It didn't even make me uneasy. Instead, it was like taking off a heavy coat after a long day, suddenly lighter, able to move. By evening, I'd settled my few belongings into their places. The photograph of my husband sat on the desk, the letter tucked beneath it. My coat hung in the wardrobe, its secret seam still intact. I would decide later whether to keep the hidden cash there or find a new place for it. I made soup again, onion, carrot, a pinch of thyme from the jar on Mrs. Howard's shelf. The smell filled the room, and I thought how strange it was to make food without the undercurrent of waiting for someone to approve or criticize. Before bed, I stepped outside to lock the back gate. The street was quiet, just the sound of wind through bare branches. In the distance, a train whistle blew, long and low, fading into the night. Back in my room, I sat on the bed and wrote one last note in my notebook for the day. I am not lost. I am here. And for the first time in longer than I could name, here was exactly where I wanted to be. The next morning, sunlight spilled across the quilt before I even opened my eyes. For a moment, I lay still, letting the warmth touch my face. No shouting from the hallway, no doors slamming, just the faint hum of Mrs. Howard's old refrigerator and the slow tick of the wall clock. I made tea and carried it to the garden bench, the quilt draped around my shoulders. The frost on the ground caught the light, turning the bare rose bushes into something almost jeweled. I breathed in the cold air until it hurt, then exhaled slowly. Freedom has a taste. You feel it at the back of your throat. After breakfast, I walked to the library. It was small but smelled of paper and dust, the way a library should. I found Lily's branch number posted by the desk and called her from the public phone. "Grandma," she said, her voice bright. "I'm at the library," I told her. "Yours is bigger, I'm sure, but this one has a charm." She laughed softly. "Do you like it there?" "I do," I said, more than I expected. "Good," she said. "I'll visit soon, maybe bring you some books." I promised to make her lunch when she came, and we hung up. On the walk back, I stopped at the bakery. The clerk, tall, with a gentle way of speaking, wrapped my bread in paper and tied it with twine. "First time I've seen you in here," he said. "I'm new to the neighborhood," I replied. It felt strange and wonderful to say that, as if I'd been given a new name. Back at the house, Mrs. Howard was knitting in the front room. "Settle in, all right?" she asked without looking up. "Better than all right," I said. She nodded, her needles clicking steadily. "Good. Quiet's easy to get used to." In the afternoon, I wrote in my notebook, not about leaving anymore, but about what to do next. Small plans, ordinary ones. Learn the bus schedule. Find the nearest park. Try the church down the street. Not for sermons, but for the Saturday bake sale Mrs. Howard had mentioned. As the light faded, I thought about him for the first time that day. I wondered if he'd noticed yet, or if he thought I was visiting a friend, or if he'd decided not to care at all. None of those possibilities hurt me. That, more than anything, told me how far I'd already gone. After dinner, I sat by the window with my knitting, a skill I hadn't touched in years. The yarn slid through my fingers, slow and steady. Outside, the streetlights came on one by one, their glow catching in the frost. I went to bed early, the quilt pulled to my chin. My last thought before sleep was not about escape, but about tomorrow. About the bread I'd slice for breakfast, the bus I might take just to see where it led. It's a small life, maybe, but it's mine, and that makes it larger than any life I've had in years. On the 15th morning, I woke before the sun, the quilt still warm around me. The air smelled faintly of the lavender sachet Mrs. Howard had tucked into my wardrobe. For a few moments, I simply listened. The faint hum of the fridge, the creak of the house settling, the distant sound of a dog barking somewhere down the street. 15 mornings since I'd left. 15 mornings without flinching at a slammed door or measuring my mood against someone else's temper. 15 mornings where the first thought I had was my own. I made tea and toasted the bread I'd bought yesterday, spreading it with the last of the blackberry jam. I sat at the small desk by the window, steam curling from my mug, and watched the first hint of light creep across the wet street. Today, I decided, I would call Lily and tell her to come. Not just for an afternoon, but for dinner. I wanted her to see this place, to know I'd made something for myself. When she answered, her voice was bright but cautious. "Hi, Grandma." "Come for dinner tonight," I said. "I'll make something warm. And bring that book you told me about." "I'll be there," she promised, without hesitation. The rest of the day passed easily. I walked to the market for potatoes, onions, and a small chicken. The man at the stall recognized me now, greeting me with a nod. At the flower shop next door, I bought a single white chrysanthemum for the table, simple, clean. Back at the house, I found Mrs. Howard in her chair, knitting. "Company tonight?" she asked with a small smile. "My granddaughter," I said. She nodded. "That's good. A house needs visitors now and then, so it doesn't forget it's alive." I spent the afternoon cooking. Potatoes roasted until crisp, chicken basted with thyme and lemon, bread warmed in the oven. The scent filled the little room, wrapping itself around me like another quilt. When Lily arrived, her eyes widened as she stepped inside. "It's so cozy," she said, turning slowly to take it in. "It's small," I told her, "but it's mine." We ate at the desk I'd pushed toward the window, the chrysanthemum in a small glass jar between us. She told me about work, about her plans for spring, about the new coat she'd found secondhand, but swore looked like it came from a shop window. I listened, feeling something settle in me. Pride, yes, but also a kind of peace I hadn't dared to imagine before. After dinner, we washed the dishes together, our hands moving easily around each other in the tiny kitchen. "I'm glad you called me," she said quietly. "I'm glad I could." When she left, she hugged me tightly, and I knew she'd be back. Later, I sat in the chair by the window, the room lit only by the small lamp on the desk. Outside, frost was forming on the pavement, catching the light from the street lamps. I opened my notebook to a clean page and wrote, "I thought leaving would feel like losing something. It didn't. I only lost what was never mine to begin with, the false peace, the careful steps, the shrinking of myself to fit someone else's comfort. What I kept is me, and that's more than enough. I closed the notebook and set it beside the photograph of my husband. His words from long ago echoed in my mind. Don't let anyone make you small, not even family. I am not small anymore. If you're reading this and someone has convinced you that survival means silence, I want you to know it doesn't. Quiet can be chosen, not forced, and the day you choose it for yourself will be the first day you breathe fully again. So breathe. Step out. Take your key, your bag, your life, and go. Because I promise you, there is a door somewhere waiting to be yours. And when it closes behind you, the quiet on the other side will not be empty. It will be freedom.